Lama Kathy.
Well, thank you very much, Yunten. It's really wonderful to have this opportunity to speak to all of you this evening. And I'm greatly appreciative of Yunten as our host and Lama Mark as our interpreter. So I'm super excited to share with you the third of the 7 points of mind training. And before we get into that, though, it's very customary to start with prayer. And so we'll start by pulling together all of our goodness and making the aspiration that through this class, studying these topics, that we will be able to benefit not just ourselves, but to benefit all sentient beings. So so Yunten will put those on the screen for us. Okay. We'll start with the Karma Kudju lineage prayer, and I'll choose whichever melody arises in my mind, and we'll dedicate this for all beings. Oh, doje chan chen te lon harodang marpa mi la chuje gampo pa du sum she ja kun kien karma pa che shi chun je ju pa zin nan dam dri tao cao sum pa den dru pa so sab lam cha ja che lang an ye pe Nyam me tro kun da po ka ju la so adep so ka ju la manam Chư pa tin no nam tar chin ji lo shen lo con ki kam par sum par jin se no kun la cha shen he pa dang Say dear to ta chư pe kom chen la ne kurjen pa me pa chin ji lo mugu kom ki go war sum pa jen Ming a ter go je pe lama la jundu so wa de pe kom chen la chu mi mu gu ke war chin ji lo Yang me gom ki ngu jir sum pa jen kan shar to pe ngo wo so ma de ma chu de kar cho pe kom chen la Gom ja lo dang dra war chin ji lo nam tok ngo wo chu kur sum pa jen chi am ha yin chi yang char wa la Magaro par char we kom chen la corde her me to par chin ji lo ke wa kun tu yan da la ma dang Tra me chu ki pa la lon chu ching sa da lang gi chen ten rab soi ne dorje changi go pan yer torsho dorje changi go pan yer torsho. Next, we'll take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha and make the aspiration that all of our practice works toward enlightenment for the sake of all beings. Or sanje chudang soji chonam la jangchu pardu dhani kyap suchi daji chinso ji pe sunam ki drola pinchi sanjay druparsho sanjay chudam soji chonam la jangchu pardu dhani kyap suchi daji jinso ji pe sunam ki drola pinchir sanjay druparsho sanjay chidam soji chonam la jangchu pardu dhani kyap suchi daji chinso ji pe sunam ji drola pinchir sanjay druparsho. And now the four immeasurables, which will be recited 3 times. O semchen tamche dewa tan dewe gyu tan tenpa gyu chik Dungal tang, dungal gi ju tan drawa chik, dungal hepe tewe, tampa tam hin drawa chik, nerin chan tan yi dan drawe, tonyan chimpola, nepar chik. Semchen tamche tewa tan tewe gyu tan tenpar gyu chik, Dungal tan, dungal gi kyutan trawa chik, dungal hepe tewa tampa tam, min trawa chik, nerin chantan yidan drawe, tonyen chempola, nepar chik. Semchen tamche tewa tan tewe gyutan tempar chik, Dungal tan, dungal gi gyutan trawa chik, dungal mepe tewa tampa tam, min trawa chik, nerin chantan yidan trawe, tonyen chimpola, nepar chik. And now we'll recite the brief 7-branch prayer. Chaksawadam juchin shapadam Jesu yirang karshin sohai Kewa chunze dagi jisapa Tamche dagi janchu chingo. Now I'll recite a short prayer of my own. O palden sawe lama rinpoche dagi chiwar pede de shala kadrin chenpo kone je sonde kusan tuking hudrup saudu so. All right. Thanks again for being here this evening. We're going to be talking about the 7-point mind training, which is one of the key practices of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. It is a practice that is done in all four lineages of Tibetan Buddhism, and it forms the foundation for our practice of the Mahayana and the Vajrayana. So I'm going to share. I'm going to do a little sharing here. I made a rudimentary outline for this evening, and I'll be moving in and out of the outline and sharing some information with you about the point 3, the first part of point 3. We only have a few slogans to cover tonight, but they're very important in being able to change our mind. If you remember, the word lo jong means mind training. Lo is mind and jong is training. So if we want to train our mind, we need to be able to change our mind from thinking in the ways that we used to think into a new way of thinking. If you remember, the main topic of the 7-point mind training is training the mind in the bodhisattva attitude. Sometimes it's called training the mind in bodhicitta. Bodhi means awakening, and it's the awakening of the spiritual awakening of the Buddha. Bodhi means awakening, and citta means mind. So if we want to have the mind of awakening, or the mind that wants to wake up, we have to practice bodhicitta. And the 7-point mind training, which is a set of 59 mind training slogans written by the great Tibetan master, Chikawa Yeshe Dorje. These 59 mind training slogans are our guide in how to change our mind. So let's start with, let's see, the outline. See if I can make it work. Okay, very good. See, you'll see I'm not using PowerPoint. I am not that skilled. So I am, but hopefully this will give us some indication. So if you remember, point 1 of the 7-point mind training was train in the preliminaries, right? That's where we've already been. And then the second is train in the main practice of bodhicitta. And now the third point is going to be turning adverse conditions into the path. So to recap, if you remember from earlier classes, like the practice of Mahamudra meditation that we do in our Karma Kagyu tradition of Buddhism, Lojong is a complete system of training that results in Buddhahood. If you remember from the class I gave a few weeks ago, you'll remember that I told the story of how I took my old copy of the Great Path to KTD Monastery one time, and I handed it to Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche because he asked to look at it, and he leafed through the book. And it was very sweet because, as we know, he didn't speak much English, and I'm not sure he read English at all. But he took this old book and looked through it, and then he handed it back to me. And through his interpreter, which is his nephew, Lama Karma Drodol, he said, "Oh," he said, "there's nothing better than this book. There's nothing better." He said, "It's a complete path to Buddhahood." He says, "You don't need anything more. You just need this book. You don't need anything else. This is a complete path to Buddhahood." And I was dumbfounded. I have to be honest. I didn't realize that Lojong was a complete path, like Mahamudra is a complete path. So I've been telling people that ever since. And in fact, Rinpoche said that Lojong was actually critical and very, very important for any Vajrayana practitioner, because he said if you don't have solid training in bodhicitta, he said you might end up doing the Vajrayana practices with the wrong motivation. And then he said it would, at the best, he said, the Vajrayana practice would bear no fruit at all. And in the worst case, it would end badly. And I thought about that, and I remembered a quotation from Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who said, if you don't do your practice correctly, he said, you will end up with egohood instead of Buddhahood. So in any case, Lojong is critical because it gives us the proper motivation for doing our Vajrayana practice. Rinpoche also said that the 7-point mind training text by Jamgon Khantrul the Great was the best presentation of this practice and the easiest to practice. So also in our review, like Mahamudra, the Lojong practice is divided into several parts. It's divided into preliminaries, the main practice, and enhancement and correction. If you've ever read any of the Mahamudra texts written by the 9th Karmapa, you'll know that those texts are also divided into these 3 sections: preliminary, main practice, and enhancement and correction. So I just find it very interesting that the Great Path of Awakening is likewise organized in this way. Let's look at the preliminaries just briefly. Remember, we learned these. The preliminary is the preliminary to a session of practice, and it is the practice of Guru Yoga. And we talked about and learned a method of Guru Yoga at the beginning of this class. Then the general preliminaries, which is the reflection on the 4 thoughts that turn the mind toward the Dharma. Our precious human life, that's the first one. Impermanence is the second one. The third one is karma, action, cause, and result. And the fourth is the defects of samsaric life. So reflecting on these 4 thoughts gives us some power and some fuel for our practice. After the preliminaries, the next thing that it's taught in the Lojong text is the main practice. And the main practice consists of 2 kinds of meditation. Meditation on ultimate bodhicitta, which is an understanding of wisdom and I guess you could say the ultimate truth of emptiness, and relative bodhicitta, which is training the mind in love and compassion. And in the text, we learn both how to practice ultimate bodhicitta meditation while sitting on our seat, and how to practice ultimate bodhicitta meditation while we're walking around off the cushion in our everyday life. In addition, we learn on the cushion practice of relative bodhicitta, love and compassion. You'll remember it's the practice of Tonglen. T-O-N-G means, that's the Tibetan word for sending, and Len, L-E-N, means taking, sending and taking. And I hope that you have been doing a little bit of Tonglen meditation every day as part of your regular practice. It will help you to learn the 7-point mind training if you get a chance to do some Tonglen every day. It also teaches a method of what I might call everyday life Tonglen, off the cushion Tonglen, and we'll review that in just a minute. And then finally, the main practice is point 2, but then enhancement and corrections, that's every other chapter in the book. 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 is all about how to expand your practice and to correct mistakes that you might make in your practice. I'm going to take a moment to tell you a story. in a way, you could say that the Great Path of Awakening is like a teacher to us, because all of the teachings we need are in the book. And like a teacher, the book starts out very simply and then becomes a little more complicated as we go along. And there are two reasons for this. Number one, it's unfamiliar material for us. And number two, it's unfamiliar practice for us. The teachings of bodhicitta emphasize our ability to let go of clinging and fixation, the greatest of which is our clinging and fixation to our sense of self, me or I. It's not easy to put aside the me or the I in any situation. We're not used to it. It's not what we've been taught our whole life. And so when we read books like The Great Path of Awakening, we might think at first that it's asking us to do something that's just too much. It's too much to let go of clinging and fixation. It's too much to let go of selfishness. Many people who practice and study this, they say, does this mean that I'm going to become a doormat for every mean person in my life? The answer is no, because you're going to learn compassion with wisdom. When we have compassion without wisdom, it's very easy to make mistakes and inadvertently become become that doormat we worry about. So what we have to do is we have to apply our compassion, but also apply wisdom. And so that's the balance that we need to work with in the Lojong practice. Now, I want to tell one more little story about the book being a teacher. A few years ago, I read an essay by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche about the teacher and student relationship. The Trungpa said that when we start our Dharma path, the teacher is like an emergency room doctor who we go to this teacher and we say, please, I'm a mess, fix me. And hopefully the teacher is very kind and gives us instruction and helps us to feel better about ourselves and our ability to practice. And so in a way, we get our life saved by the emergency room doctor who is our teacher. But as we go along and continue to practice under our teacher's guidance, Trungpa says our relationship with the teacher begins to change. At first, we treated the teacher like a very powerful doctor. And then he becomes more like a friend, a spiritual friend. And becoming a spiritual friend, we become more comfortable in the teacher's presence. However, what Trungpa said next is that the teacher gradually begins to mind our business. That's how he puts it in the article. The teacher begins to gently, or maybe not so gently, remind us of our faults and gently remind us of things we need to do differently. Like, it would be really good if you stopped hurting yourself. And, oh, it would be really nice if you stopped hurting other people. And in this way, the teacher begins to get into our habits and pull them apart and show us the possibility of a life beyond our bad habits. But it isn't always comfortable. And as we get into this book, into the Great Path of Awakening, the deeper we get into the book, the more the book, which is like a teacher for us, begins to mind our business. And you're going to start seeing that in point 3. So I just thought I would start out by explaining the idea of a book being like a teacher and our relationship with our teacher starting out one way, but then it becoming a little more difficult for us. Oh, and by the way, just to finish the essay story, Trungpa said that the teacher eventually in the Vajrayana becomes like a master to us. I would call it a Star Wars Jedi Knight who just says, do this, and we will do it. So in any case, however we look at our teacher and consider our teacher, it starts with a little bit of a rescue by an emergency room doctor, and then becomes a friend who begins to mind our business. And like I say, you'll see this in the slogans we're going to talk about tonight. They're nice, but they kind of have an edge. And you'll see this throughout the whole rest of the book. You'll see lots of these slogans that have a little bit of a pinch to them. Okay, back to the outline. Okay, whoops. I have to pick the right one. Okay, here we go. Okay, so in point 3, we are now entering into the enhancement and correction part of the Lojong system. So point 3, the title of point 3 is Turning Adverse Conditions into the Path. So this practice of turning adverse conditions into our path of awakening, it actually starts way back in point 2, what we just covered. The slogan, 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 seeds of virtue. Once we learn this slogan, we will be doing this for the rest of our lives. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche once said, once a person dedicates themselves to the bodhisattva path and takes the bodhisattva vow, he said, they will never be bored ever again in their life, because they will either be learning about bodhicitta and correcting their own mistakes, or they will be trying to help other beings. He said, you'll never get bored ever again because you will always be busy. And I can tell you from my own point of view, absolutely right. Because when I'm not observing my mind and seeing my faults and correcting them, I'm always looking for ways to try to help other people. Okay, anyway, so daily life Tonglen, that 3 objects slogan. Once you learn it, you'll be doing it forever. So get used to it. And in fact, I tell people to read the formula daily, every day, so that the path is right there when you need it. Now, you might say, well, I wonder what that formula is. What is that formula that I'm supposed to be reviewing every day? Well, in the book, which if you have the 2005 edition, is on page, whoops. Yep. Page 16, it says 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 seeds of virtue. And then Dzongkhen Khantrul explains it by saying, the 3 poisons continually arise in connection with 3 objects. Compulsive attachment arises for objects that are pleasant or useful. Aversion arises for objects that are unpleasant or harmful. And stupidity and indifference for other objects. Then he encourages us to recognize the poisons as soon as they arise. Well, good luck. We will not always recognize our negative patterns when they arise, but usually we will get a clue because something is going to hurt. If somebody has called us a name and we're getting angry, that pain can alert us to the fact that we're grasping and clinging, and we need to apply this slogan. Or we might actually see something really wonderful that we want, and then we begin to feel pain because we are anxious that we won't get it, or we're anxious that once we get it, we'll lose it, and so on. And so usually when we're holding on to something, that's when the pain starts. And that will give us the clue that it is time to start reciting the formula for purifying and transforming this emotion. So then he says, recognize these objects, these poisons as soon as they arise. Then you use the poison. You use the poison to start a practice, and you start it with an aspiration. And so I teach people to like read this aspiration out loud every day so that they'll have it memorized. It goes like this. He says, for example, when attachment arises, think like this. May every bit of every sentient being's attachment be contained in this attachment of mind. May all sentient beings have the seed of virtue of being free of attachment. May this attachment of mind contain all their disturbing emotions. And until they attain Buddhahood, may they be free of such disturbing emotions. And then he says, if you can use this with all of the emotions that come up for you, the 3 poisons can become 3 seeds of virtue. Now, the reason I'm reviewing this is because point 3 is based on this. And in fact, the whole rest of the book is based on this. And so it's important to have this in your mind and to use it when you can. So here's an example. What I did was I rendered this aspiration into some simplified English words. Using Jamgon controls, the translation of Jamgon controls is the best if you can memorize it. But it's a lot of words, and so sometimes it might be easier to memorize something shorter. And so when you're faced with pain, suffering, or adverse circumstances or mental affliction, what you do is you take a moment to identify how you are feeling. You might say, I'm angry, or I'm sad, or I'm upset. And then use this formula, which is based on Jamgon control. You can say, may my difficult emotion, my anger, or my sadness, or my jealousy, contain the anger, sadness, or jealousy of all sentient beings. And by my working through this moment of this feeling, may I and all beings be free of this kind of feeling, this kind of negative emotion. May I be free of it. And furthermore, may we all become Buddhas, the complete freedom from this emotion. And this way we can practice easily with whatever afflictive states arise. And so this is something that is useful. But as I mentioned, it's much better to use Jamgon Control's, the translation of his words, because it's more complete. It's a more complete aspiration. Okay, let's go back to the outline. 3 objects. Okay, then. Okay, here we go. I'm working my way through it here. Okay, so if you learn it, you'll do it forever. And if you read it every day, then it's there for you when you need it. Eventually, you'll get it memorized. If you read it once a day, every day, that formula, you will memorize it. Now, you might say, well, how am I going to turn adverse conditions into the path? Well, I have a prayer that might help you. This was spoken by Khenpo Tsultrim Gyaltsen Rinpoche, just a really, really great master. And I tell people, if you read this every day, and you'll be able to practice with adverse conditions. And you'll see what I mean when you see the prayer. This prayer was given by him to a friend of mine, and she gave it to me. And ever since then, I've been giving it to other people. Now, see if I can find it. I have 3 windows open, and I have to find the right one. Okay. Stand by. Technical difficulties. Here it is. All right. Now I gotta hope I can get it in front of me here. Well, nope, that's not it. Okay, let's try one more. Too many windows open, right? Okay, I'll try it one more time. I got another idea. Ah, here we go. I got it. So Kempo Tsultrim, he was really good at writing prayers and helping people with problems. So if you want to aspire to taking bad circumstances and adverse conditions as the path, you can recite this prayer since it came from such a great master. You can recite it every day. May all of our bad circumstances arise as friends on the path. May all bad circumstances actually bring us benefit. May we realize emptiness, the complete freedom from all elaborations. And as a result of fulfilling these aspirations, may we bring great benefit to all sentient beings. What I love about this prayer is that the first sentence says it all. May all of our bad circumstances arise as friends. We may not feel that way when bad things happen, but if we can treat the things that happen, even the bad things, as something that could actually bring us benefit, wow, what a relief that would be. So there's a lot of us who think, wow, turning adverse conditions into the path of awakening, I'm not up for it. I'm not ready. But at least we can aspire to it by reciting words like these. So that's something I want to recommend to you because it's helped me a great deal. So, all right. So the next thing I'd like to do is I have a copy of the Great Path, but it's the wrong translation. It's the older translation. So I really apologize, but I'm going to have to show you the part that we're going to be studying now is going to be from the old book, but you can translate. So here's the what we're going to be doing. The new translation of this is when misfortune fills the world and its inhabitants, make adversity the path of awakening. Okay. So the old translation is when evil fills the world and its inhabitants, change adverse conditions into the path of awakening. But here's what Jamgon Khantrul writes. This is the slogan, right? The italics is the 12th century slogan by Chikawa Yeshe Dorje. And the rest of it is Jamgon Khantrul the Great's commentary, where he tells us how to practice it. When your world is full of the pain and suffering that are the fruition of evil, meaning our negative karma, when prosperity and wealth are diminishing, troublesome people create difficulties, and so on, he says you must change the adverse conditions in which you find yourself into the path of awakening. I need to stop here for a minute and tell you that this word is very important. Must. Must. You must change this into the path. And why does he say must? Why is it so important? Well, from my own experience, what I have noticed is that when I cannot practice with adverse circumstances, I usually end up strengthening all of my bad habits. I only practice my bad habits. I don't practice my good habits of awakening. And so he's basically saying, if we want to become enlightened beings, we have to start making changes in how we view and work with adverse circumstances. I know it's hard, and I know it's not easy, but he's saying we have to try. We have to try. Then Jamgon Khantrul says there are 3 ways to make this transformation: by relying on relative bodhicitta, by relying on ultimate bodhicitta, and by pursuing and doing special practices. So tonight we're going to talk about relative bodhicitta only. The next class we'll talk about ultimate bodhicitta and special practices. So going back to the outline for just a moment, there's something I want to make a note about. Slogan number 11, this is the one when evil fills the world and its inhabitants. Again, must is important because without transformation, we end up training in the opposite of awakening, which is clinging and fixation, which then expand and prolong our suffering in samsara. So this is really important. It's not optional. And we are being invited to look at things differently and not to do. We are being asked not to do the things we usually do when things go wrong. Now, we're human and we have bad habits. So what usually do we do when something goes wrong? I know what my own bad habits are. My own bad habits are when something goes wrong, I look for someone to blame. And then I get angry. Those are the 2 things. Those are my 2 go-tos. Those are my 2 choices that I usually make. If I'm going to do something wrong, if something bad happens, I'm going to blame somebody else for it and then get mad at them. So Shikawa Yoshidorje very carefully says, human beings, I understand you. Human beings, I understand you. I know what you do. And here's my advice. My advice is don't do that. Do something else instead. And so that's why verse number 12 or slogan number 12 is drive all blame into one. So that's telling us don't blame externally or don't blame yourself. And the second slogan is be grateful to everyone, which means don't get angry at people, at other people. So now we're being asked to apply ourselves to bodhicitta in a way that we're not used to. So let's take a look at what we're being asked to do. Instead of getting angry, what we have to do is we have to recognize that anytime something goes wrong, there's a lot going on in the background that we can't see. For example, we're not enlightened beings, so we can't read our karma to know what in the situation what part of the situation is what we brought on to ourselves. So let me show you in what Jamgon Khantrul says in his commentary. He says, whether you are physically ill, troubled in your mind, insulted by others, or bothered by enemies, in short, whatever annoyance, major or minor, comes up in your life and affairs, do not lay blame on anything else, thinking that this or that or such and such caused this or that problem. Rather, you should consider this. My mind grasps at a self where there is no self. From time without beginning, my self-fixation has, in following its own whims in samsara, perpetrated various non-virtuous actions. all of the sufferings I now experience are the results of those actions. No one else is to blame. This ego-cherishing attitude is to blame. I shall do whatever I can to subdue it. Now, I may have mentioned this to you early in one of the earlier classes, but in mind training literature, in Lojong literature, you're going to see a lot of interesting use of language. You're going to see the writers use exaggeration, and you're going to see the writers use irony and even a little humor sometimes. But you will also see them create this fictional character called ego fixation, and then scold the ego fixation. Part of the reason that they do this is because we have Buddha nature. We the Dharma practitioner, we have Buddha nature. And so we can't scold our Buddha nature, but we can scold our bad habits of self-fixation. And so this is why you'll see this in Shantideva, in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. You'll see Shantideva talk like this. You'll see Chikao Yeshe Dorje and Atisha talk like this. It's in a lot of the Lojong literature, this idea of self-fixation really being the enemy and really being who should bear the blame. And for some people, this is a little too hard to accept, because a lot of people, they have an exaggerated idea about themselves. Some people, for some people, their self-fixation manifests as the thought, I'm the best. And for some people, their self-fixation manifests as, I am the best at being the worst. And so whichever of these two ego fixations we suffer from, they're both a problem. And they're both an exaggeration, because we're not all bad, but we're also not all good. So we have to find a middle ground. Remember, Buddhism is the middle path. And so the middle path is being realistic about what we may have been responsible for in the past. So I remember one time when Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche was teaching about Lojong, he said, maybe you have experienced this. He said, have you ever met someone who you instantly liked, or who instantly liked you? He said, that's a person you've had a good relationship with in a previous life. And he said, and also he said, have you ever met someone who you instantly disliked, or who instantly disliked you? He said, that's a person you have had a negative relationship in a previous life. This person is a person you have caused harm to. And the reason they're being mean to you now is they're trying to collect a karmic debt. And so he said, you have to understand this and work toward a good relationship with beings. So let's go back to the book. Okay. So, yeah, he then quotes Shantideva, again, this idea, what troubles there are in the world, how much fear and suffering there is, all of these arise from ego clinging. What will this great demon do to me? And so forth. I don't have time to go through all of them, but, oh, here's the other one that's good. For hundreds of lives in samsara, he, meaning ego fixation, has caused me trouble. Now I recollect all my grudges, and I shall destroy you, you selfish mind. I know a lot of people find this sort of humorous, and it is kind of funny, but we do have to be realistic and try our best to stop blaming. Some people overly blame themselves for things. And somebody asked Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche about this one time. They said, what causes this self-blaming and this self-shaming? What causes this? And Rinpoche said, in answer to that, he said, this excessive amount of shame and blame that we do to ourselves, he says it's not correct. He says this excessive shame and blame comes about when we take more than our fair share of responsibility for something that happened. In other words, we're a little greedy for more blame. We take more than our share of responsibility for something that happened. And he said, so this is why it's important to reflect on ourselves in a realistic way and make aspirations that we have a proper understanding of regret. Now, when we get into the next section of point 3, the Chikao Yeshe Dorje talks about the practice, the special practices. Jamgon Khantrul explains that one of these special practices is the practice of confession and purification. When we get into the practice of Buddhist confession, it talks about ways that we can acknowledge and feel the right amount of regret for something that happened and purify that negativity through the practice of confession, regretting our wrong, taking a remedy of making confession, and then also relying on the Buddha as our witness and resolving not to repeat the negative action in the future. These 4 powers of confession will be explained to you in future classes, and you can use them to take the right amount of responsibility for something that happened and purify the karma. So I won't get into that now. That's for the future class. But I thought it was interesting and important to talk about this, this in terms of the third point. We have just a little bit more to do. And then we might actually have some time for questions. So if we're not busy blaming other people, what do we do instead? And if we're not busy being angry at people, what do we do instead? Instead, he said we should be grateful to everyone. That's Chikao Yeshe Dorje's slogan. And Jamgon Khantrul says instead of, because remember, our bad habit is that when bad things happen, we blame somebody else and then we get mad at them and get angry at them. And so instead of blaming, we take the blame and put it in the right place. And instead of getting angry, we think of other people and other situations with gratitude. This may be a little bit difficult. Those of you who remember the teachings of Barter Tulku Rinpoche, he said one time, I know how hard this is. He said, but if you can take all of the misfortune that befalls you as purification of your negative karma, that's great. He said, but I do understand that it's really, really hard. So I thought that was good. He was realistic. So it says here, work on Tonglen, work on taking and sending. And so he says, really think about it. He says, in general, all methods for attaining Buddhahood rely on sentient beings, meaning the beings we're trying to help and serve. Therefore, to the individual who wishes to awaken, sentient beings are as worthy of gratitude as Buddhas. If you remember, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, was once asked, how is it, Your Holiness, that you do not bear a grudge against the communist who caused the damage to Tibet? And he said, well, without people causing harm, when would I learn patience? He said. Of course, the Dalai Lama is a great awakened being. We're not quite there. We're not that advanced, but I like the idea. So he says, sentient beings are as worthy of gratitude as Buddhas. Specifically, all sentient beings are worthy of gratitude since there's not one that hasn't been our parent. And you remember that from one of the previous discussions in the previous class, when we think about the kindness of our parents and how all sentient beings at some point has been our mother or father or brother or sister. Then he says, in particular, all those who hurt me are worthy of gratitude since they are my companions and helpers for gathering the accumulations of merit and pristine wisdom and clearing away the obscurations of disturbing emotions and conceptual knowledge. Well, here's the thing. I understand this. I understand that it's the teaching, but I also understand that for us as human beings, this is very difficult. So what we may have to do at the beginning is at least pray for and wish well for other beings. Maybe we can't be grateful for them yet, but maybe we could just do our best not to hate them. What I tell people is, if you have somebody who's really negative in your life and you can't imagine having compassion for them, then at least pray for them so that during the time you're praying for them, you're not actively hating them. And I think that's a good start. So then he encourages us not to be angry, not even at beings we think of as being below us, a dog or an insect. He said, you try to help them if you can, but if you can't help, which sometimes it happens that there's no way you can help them, may this sentient being be quickly rid of pain and enjoy happiness. May they come to attain Buddhahood. And then say, from now on, all the virtuous acts I do shall be for his welfare. Now, the idea is, I remember Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche told a friend of mine who was having trouble with someone, you should pray for that person. And then he said, you should dedicate all of your merit to them. And the person said, no way. I couldn't possibly imagine doing that. No way. So that's realistic. But slowly, perhaps over time, we can try. Now, here's one that's very tough. And I like to go over it because it's very important. You know, Jamgon Khantrao the Great lived in the 19th century. So that means this is the 1800s. And so people would come to him and talk about gods and demons troubling them. Well, we may not have gods and demons that we see, but we may have people who are troublemakers for us. And so he says, well, he said, when you have somebody who's troubling you, think like this. Well, this trouble now occurs because I, from time without beginning, have made trouble for him. Now I shall give him my flesh and blood in recompense. I know that not everybody is ready to practice this. Not everybody is ready to imagine the one who troubles you to be present in front of you and mentally give him your body as you say, here, revel in my flesh and blood and whatever else you want. Then meditate that this troublemaker enjoys your flesh and blood and is filled with pure happiness. Well, that's not exactly easy, is it? Maybe you have heard about or learned the practice of offering the body that's called cho or chu or severance. Well, this is sounding a lot like that, isn't it? But I have a feeling that this kind of visualization is maybe a little difficult for us. So I have an alternative. I will make sure that this is on the class page because it came from Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche personally. One day, I was acting as a secretary to Rinpoche, and I was reading letters to him in English and trying to help him understand in English what the person's problem was. And he would then tell me in English what the answer should be. And I read a letter from actually someone I knew. And the person said, I am experiencing illness, and I feel my illness is being caused by a demon. Can you help me? And Rinpoche gave me a look like, is this guy for real? And I said, yes, I know this person personally, and they really believe this. And said, and then so Rinpoche said, no problem. I have a solution. Here's what you tell him. He said, you tell him that obviously, because there's a problem now, in the past, you caused trouble for this demon. You did not have a good relationship. So now the demon is coming back to collect the karmic debt. So he said, you can help the demon by meditating like this. And then he said, you sit on your meditation seat and you imagine the being who you are having trouble with in front of you and facing you. You just imagine that. Then you imagine that above your heads and between you is the Buddha. And then you pray to the Buddha. He said, you don't pray to the Buddha to protect you from the demon. He said, you pray to the Buddha to equally protect you and the demon. Offer them equal protection. And he said, after you've done that, he said, you create in your mind an imaginary gift. And inside this imaginary gift, he said, you put all of your worldly goods, everything you have, everything you own, all of your merit, you package this inside the box, this imaginary box, and then you send it to the demon as a gift. And you make the aspiration that the demon can accept the gift and be happy. And that was the entirety of the practice. Then, of course, you dedicate the merit, right? Well, I actually knew this person. So a few weeks later, I talked to them and they said, oh, I got this wonderful practice from Khenpo Rinpoche, how to deal with my demon, he said. And he said, the illness is gone. It's all done. And so I started giving this practice, since it came from Rinpoche, to other people. When they were having arguments, I met two women who had been childhood friends, and they argued with each other, and then they were angry. And each one of them came to me individually and said, I feel so bad. I'm mad at my childhood friend. I feel so bad, but I don't know how to say I'm sorry. And they both came to me individually to ask about this and say how sad they were. So I gave them both this practice, and it was resolved in a couple of weeks. So I feel like there is something positive about being able to practice in this way, even if you're using your imagination to repay a karmic debt. It can actually be helpful. And so anyway, so it's something to think about. Then there's one more point to cover in this section, and that is to deal with illness or problem. He said, if you have illness or suffering, he said, think like this with complete sincerity. If this had not happened, I would have been distracted by worldly involvements, and I would not maintain mindfulness of the Dharma. Since this illness has brought Dharma to my attention again, it is the Guru's or the Three Jewels activity, and I am very grateful. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche once gave a teaching called the 5 joys of misfortune. And I'll share it with you. He said, when misfortune comes your way, he said, there are 5 ways to take joy in this misfortune. 2 of them have to do with karma. 2 of them have to do with compassion, and there is one other. So the 2 that have to do with karma is the first joy of misfortune is that you realize that karma causes suffering, and you make the aspiration to do no more bad karma. So he said that's the first one, that you recognize how dangerous karma is and you try to do better. The second joy that is based on karma is that you can think like this person is thinking, that because of this illness, I am purifying my negative karma. I am happy that my negative karma is being purified by this situation. He said that's the second joy of misfortune. He said the third joy of misfortune is that it increases our compassion. He said, because when we suffer, we understand how other people suffer, and we form a feeling of compassion for that suffering, not just by ourselves, but for all beings. So our compassion increases. And the second joy that has to do with compassion is that we can use the situation to do Tonglen practice. So those are the four of the 5 joys of misfortune. Number 1, we recognize the negativity of karma and we make the aspiration to do no more bad karma. Second, we can rejoice that our karma is coming to fruition and will not bother us again. Also, misfortune causes us to be more compassionate toward others, and it gives us an opportunity to practice Tonglen. The 5th of the 5 joys of misfortune is that we learn humility. Because when misfortune comes to us, we have to rely on other people's help, and sometimes we have to ask for other people to help us, and that reduces our pride. So that's a little bit about the third point, the first slogans of the third point of mind training. And Jamgon Khantrul sums it up here. He says, to sum up, whoever thinks and acts out of a concern to achieve their own well-being is a worldly person. Whoever thinks and acts out of concern to achieve the well-being of others is a Dharma person. Longri Tangpa, who wrote the 8 stanzas of thought transformation, he said, I open to you as deep a teaching as there is. Pay attention. All faults are your own. All good qualities are the Lord's, sentient beings. The point here is give victory and gain and victory to others, take loss and defeat for ourselves. Other than this, there is nothing to understand. I think you may remember from a previous class, give gain and victory to others means don't retaliate when someone criticizes you. And taking loss and defeat for ourselves means that we accept setbacks and try our best not to get revenge. So that's a little bit about point 3. Wow, that was a lot. So I don't know if you have some questions, but we have a little bit of time, maybe 10 minutes. So you can put them in the chat. But that covers the working with adverse circumstances through relative bodhicitta. The next week, we're actually going to be doing Q&A with all of the lamas and all the Khenpos and lamas next week. And then I think after that, we'll be talking about working with adverse conditions with ultimate bodhicitta. And it's also okay if you don't have questions.
Last week, it took a while before any questions came, and then all of a sudden there was a flood of them.
Okay. Well, then I will stand by. And here's one now. Okay. Tom from Chicago says, hi. And yeah, well, hi back. Wanted to ask about being less reactionary at times, in particular when off the cushion and dealing with others giving us stress. Okay, Mark, would you like to translate that?
Oops, I haven't brought him in. Give me just a moment to do that.
Oops. Yeah, okie doke.
Okay, Lama Mark, you're in here now.
OK， 这个问题是这样讲，就是说你这个 Lama Kathy 是说，对于这个我们碰到一个困难的状况的时候呢，我们希望能够不要那样子立刻就能够反应，那你应该怎么去做？给他说。
Okay, so I think like anything else, this is going to be it will run the gamut. There will be easy things to deal with and difficult things to deal with. We'll start there.
这通常还有2个部分来可以做，一个就是从简单的，一个是从比较困难的部分来做，这2个部分。老师。
When we do quiet sitting meditation, we get good at letting thoughts go.
当我们在这个正式的这个禅修的时候，我们练习就是让我们的这个念头能够离去。老师。
But when we're not on the cushion, it becomes really harder to let thoughts go.
可是我们如果在这个下座的时候呢，这个时候呢，你要让这些情绪或者念头，离开有点困难。老师。
We have habits that come from lifetime after lifetime of just immediately reacting to something that happens.
我们通常有一种习性，就是当一个事情发生以后呢，我们的习惯就是立刻就有一个反应会发生。老师。
So it's going to take time.
因为这个原因的时候，我们可能需要慢慢的去练习，有时间。
Sometimes you won't be able to work with the 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 seeds of virtue slogan until after the fact.
那有些时候呢，你可能没有办法对于我们讲的用3个目标，或者是3个善，或者3个种子这个方式去处理这个处理这些情况。So
maybe somebody says something really mean to you and then you get really angry.
有时候可能就是说，当别人说一些很不好的话的时候，你可能会生气。
But it's not too late to actually practice this.
但事实上呢，也不会太晚，你还是可以去修。So
Khenpo Rinpoche said this in one of his talks. He said, if you make a mistake and get angry or do something wrong out of ignorance, he said, he said, don't give yourself a hard time.
例如说 Khenpo Rinpoche 曾经讲说，如果由于你的无明，所以呢造成了很多错误，那你可以给你一些，你就不要这样子做，就是可以给你一些时间。So
he said, instead of giving yourself a hard time, you should take on the mistakes of all beings in your mistake.
在这个情况就是你不要对自己不好了，而是呢将 所有其他众生的这些困难，都把它集在一起，所以说就等于收摄了所有的其他人的恶业。那说，
So you can take on the anger of all beings after the fact.
所以说你可以这样做，就是把这个，把别人这个恶业呢都收集起来以后呢，就等于在这个所有这个事情发生了以后再做。
If you can do that, then that's a good beginning, even if you can't do it while it's actually happening to you.
所以说这个不见得是在当下，而是在以后的时候，你呢将这些其他的这个恶业，就是把你的这个业，或者你所做的这些不好，这个不好困难的时候呢，这个情况呢，这个情绪升起来的时候，这个在以后做，不是当场做，也是可以的。说，
Yeah, because I think that we sometimes expect too much of ourselves when we're training in Dharma.
有时候我们觉得我们好像就是说要求我们自己过分太高了。说，
This is why I'm so happy that Rinpoche said we could practice with our mistakes, because we often make the mistake and then we can purify the mistake by taking on the mistakes of all beings.
这就是我觉得很高兴，就是当我们每个人都会犯错，对吧？所以呢，我很高兴就听到说，仁波切就是跟我们讲说，当我们犯错的时候，我们也可以把别人的犯错呢，通通集结起来，我们一起来对峙。说，
In this way, we can train in a quieter environment and then gradually get closer and closer and closer to being able to work with our anger and our negativity right when it's happening.
所以这个地方可以让我们呢，一开始呢，就是在一个比较安静的地方，我们慢慢练习。可是到了这样子一步一步的做了以后呢，可能以后就可以在当下就可以处理这些所谓的负面的情绪。说，
And this practice of giving a gift to someone, I call it gifting Tonglen, doing this giving of a gift to someone who's causing us trouble. That's a great way to practice with someone who's giving you stress.
那我称这个呢，就是将给别人礼物的这个呢，就是叫做礼物交换啊，就是当别人给你这个困难的时候呢，你给他一个礼物，一种交换法。说，
We may not know what to do when we're actually with the person, but when we're not with them, we can do this prayer and make an offering to them.
我们可能在当下这个事情发生的时候，我们没办法做到，可是我们可以在这个私下，就是后来以后的时间内呢，用这种礼物交换法来做。说，
You may have to do it day after day after day after day, but over time, it actually changes the dynamic of the relationship.
你可能要每天都要练习练习练习。当你这样做的不断的练习以后，你可能会感觉到这个整个的动态的状况会改变。说，
I had a situation in which I was really angry with someone, and I was holding a grudge.
我有一个情况，就是当我也碰到这种很困难的状况，那时候我是心理上还有很困难。那
I
时候
was so I was so disappointed in myself. I'm a Dharma person. I'm not supposed to feel like this.
我感觉到我自己真糟糕，因为我自己是个修行人，怎么会感觉这么糟？
But I remembered Rinpoche's advice to my friend who had the demon and who said he was troubled by a demon. And so I started doing this with the person I had the grudge against. And it took many weeks of meditating. And then I began to feel different.
那我记得我们刚刚不是有讲一个故事吗？就是我的朋友他有一个恶魔给他导致他那个生病的这个情况，然后呢，我就想起这个想法以后呢，我就开始花了好几个礼拜呢去调整我自己，然后就是用这个送礼物的交换法，然后花了好几个礼拜以后，我就发现这个我的心态呢得到了改变。那时候，
I hope that helps, Tom.
因为我希望能够改这个对他们有帮助。
So there's another question from Bonnie. What is the difference between the meaning of mind, the word for mind in Lojong, and the meaning of mind referenced in the word bodhicitta? What is the difference between these two?
这个地方这个问题是关于这个修心里面的这个修心里面的心跟这个我们讲的菩提心的心到底有没有不同？老师，
I have to admit, I don't know Sanskrit and I don't know Tibetan very well.
我必须跟大家承认，我自己对这个梵文跟这个西藏文都不熟。
But I'll tell you the way it seems to me that they're the same. I'll tell you how I think they're the same.
我觉得他们是一样的。我告诉你为什么他们是相同的。
Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, when he was talking about Lojong, said that really what we are training is our attitude.
那这个 Khenpo 仁波切曾经讲过的时候，我们讲这个我们在修心的里面修的那个心呢，这样是一种态度。
We start with an attitude that's mostly about ourselves and a little bit selfish.
我们一开始可能是比较有点点自私的那种态度。
And we have to change that to gradually being about caring for and helping others.
我们必须将慢慢的改变以后，成为比较能够慈悲的一个人。
And we can't change our behavior right away, but we can change our attitude.
我们不可能改变我们的行为，但是我们可以改变我们这种思考的方向。
When we make the decision that we're going to try our best to restrain ourselves from getting too angry or too upset about things, when we make a promise to ourselves to restrain ourselves, this is a really positive thing, even if we don't succeed.
当我们承诺我们要去改变的时候呢，这实际上是非常正面的。虽然我们不见得能够成功，但是这是一个承诺。
And I think that the mind of awakening or bodhicitta is very similar in that we have to train ourselves to have the attitude of wanting to benefit others.
同样在我们讲的菩提心也是一样的，就是我们需要能够修炼修行，能够呢去利益他人。
Unfortunately, though, we're probably going to have to ask Kevo Sanjay or somebody who's really familiar with the two languages to help us understand it for real.
可能我们必须要去问这个 Khenpo 桑姐，关于他了解这个梵文跟这个藏文，然后可以给我们更好的解释。So,
yeah, and believe it or not, I don't think we have any other questions.
Well, I'd like to toss in a quick comment, and that would be a wonderful question to ask again next week because we'll have the experts on at that time.
他说这个下个礼拜可能会有一个专家来。
Yeah, so
下个礼拜会问同样的问题。
So if you have questions, this is a great time to write. Thank you, Yunten. That's really good. We'll write them all down, and then you'll be ready for next week. So Bonnie, can you put a bookmark in that? Okay. All right, she's on it. Okay, because see, this is going to be a question that helps a lot of people. I always encourage people to ask questions because if they have a question themselves, there's at least one or two or three other people in the group who have the same question.
我都希望大家能够多问问题，因为可能问一个问题，那其实这好几个人都有同样的问题，所以我是很鼓励大家问问题的。老师。
Okay, well, this is where we'll have to close for tonight.
可能今天就必须在这边圆满了。
You've been very patient, and I really appreciate it because it's a lot of material to study.
我感谢大家能够在这边呢，今天是很多的这个材料的，感谢大家耐心的听了我的讲课。
But if we can keep working to use the 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 Seeds of Virtue slogan, if we can keep working on that slogan, you might find, as a friend of mine did, that one day you will be feeling something difficult or sad or bad, and you will be able to take on the suffering of others, and suddenly it will change everything in your mind.
我希望大家能够用到这个记，就是对于3种对境，3种毒，3个种子，这个记呢，能够对治我们平常所碰到的这种各种困难的这种状况，而可以得到一种修心的这种成果。老师，
I've heard quite a few people give me their stories of how they've been able to change their mind in an instant through using that slogan.
我有好几个朋友都跟我讲说，他们利用这个记言呢，得到一个蛮好的一个成果。
I wish you great inspiration and success.
我希望大家能够成功。
I will try my best to give all of the pieces of information I shared tonight, all the little documents. I'll try to give them all to the office so they can be posted and downloaded from the class page.
我会把这个我今天的这些等于说教材呢，放到给那个我们的 KTT 的那个，然后呢给 KTT 以后呢，他会把它再放到这个网络上呢，给大家能够下载。
It may take a few days, so please be patient.
可能会好几天，也请大家这个原谅。
Okay. Well, now is a good time for us to gather together all of the goodness of our practice and dedicate it to all sentient beings.
在这个时候，是我们将我们大家的所有的善根呢，都合在一起来做回向，要回向给所有的众生。
So I thank you. And Yunten, you can put those prayers up for us.
我们再做回向。
Okay. And yeah, here we go. O jiao kun nin che ran zu karma pa. Jiao kun trin le chi du karma pa. Kiao kun dun so buang kur karma pa. Or gendro du trin le shap ten so. Sunam di tam che zipani. Tom ne ne pedranam pam jene. Ke gana chi palap trupai. Si pe so le dro an yer dro sho. Jampal pa wo ji tar ken pa tang. Kun tu zampo de yan de jinte. De da kun gi jesu da lo ching. Ge wa di da tam che rap tu ngo. Sanjay kusum ne pe jin la tang. Chuni min jer den pe jin la tang. Gen dun mi che dun pe jin la ki. Ji tar ngo wa mun lam dru par shoy. Du ji le jiao jiao wei trin le pa. Karma pa ten ten pe ning po di. Cho tar kun chap chap chi jun mi che. Ta para pel pel wei tarashi sho. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and see you next week. Happy practicing.
Thank you, Lama Kathy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lama. Thank you, Lama Mark, for your translation. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we look forward to seeing you in the coming weeks.